Cooked by the devil! Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach. And today we have with us our friend and guest, Emily Rodriguez.
Hi, I'm an artist. I drew the logo for this podcast, actually.
Yeah.
Cool. Today we are reviewing Rosemary's Baby, which is a 1968 American psychological horror film directed by Roman Polanski. Fuck Roman Polanski. And starring Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes. It's a story of a young newlywed couple that moves into a nice downtown apartment where they are beset upon by old people that live above them. Little do they know that it is all a demonic plot to introduce a new antichrist into the world via the surrogate that is Rosemary. So a lot of relationships with paranoia, women's liberation, body and choice, and of course the occult. So definitely an interesting film. Roman Polanski sucks. And it was produced by William Castle, who is one of my favorite directors and producers.
Can I just get your reasoning on why Roman Polanski sucks?
I'm pretty sure he's a pedophile, isn't he?
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole thing?
Yeah.
With, like, the sexual abuse cases? But Mia Farrow in this movie is incredible.
Oh, I love Mia Farrow.
I think all the acting in this movie is very good.
I honestly love the acting of the two old people, which is, I think, Sidney Blackmer and Ruth Gordon. They are such believably personable old people, which I think is so lovely in a horror film where their entire machinations are nefarious and satanic. They just don't seem like the type of people to worship Satan. And I think that that's why this movie is so fun. Because it is, in a way, a little bit comedic and a little bleak comedy. It's mostly those two. Like, it's the Ethel and Fred complex, you know, the I Love Lucy. Like, you're just like, I love their neighborly antics. And then you're like, these people are not good people. But yeah.
I think part of why they were so effective is because sometimes there's this fear that surrounds old people, or I shouldn't say old people, elderly people. It's partly because they remind us of our own mortality, I feel. Mm-hmm. But also, in this case, it kind of makes you wonder if they are subsisting off of Satan. There's some kind of like ritual that might be causing them to live longer, because everyone in their satanic cult is a senior citizen.
Right, yeah, they're all old people, which is great.
It just makes me wonder, like, are they doing some other kind of like side rituals that, like, they're not just trying to provide an antichrist.
Right.
It's like maybe they're also sapping the youth out of other people in some other ritual. And it kind of makes you wonder then what the whole deal with Terry was. She was the young tenant that they had. Right. And she had nothing but nice things to say about them. And they didn't really need a husband in there because the devil was just going to impregnate the, quote, vessel anyways. So I wonder if, like, was she a failed Rosemary, or what do you guys think?
So.
What's the deal?
I think that's the implication.
Because she does have the Tannis root thing.
Yeah, the charm necklace.
The devil's pepper, wasn't it?
It's Tannis root, right. That's what it's called.
Which is, I don't think it's real.
No, it's not. They call it Tannis root, but it's actually devil's pepper. Like, it shows it in the book that Rosemary gets later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but is devil's pepper even real? Oh, it is real.
Probably is really used in the occult as well. But I think that Terry is definitely supposed to be like the surrogate, but it's a lot easier, I think, to convince Rosemary to carry a child to term. It would be more believable for her to be pregnant, and we sort of know Terry has this, like, long background history. I kind of thought that Terry is the Mary Magdalene to Rosemary's Mary.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, like, this pure, innocent woman that is Rosemary, and then Terry's side person.
That makes a lot of sense because talking about drugs and alcohol, and then she just said like a very vague and some other stuff. And so it kind of makes you wonder what else she was into. That
Rock music.
Yeah, exactly. Mary Magdalene, the inventor of the electric guitar, was also known for. Well, speaking of religion, I guess. I mean, obviously, it's kind of what the whole movie is about, since it's almost anti-religion. Also, these flashback visions that Rosemary has, where there's like the one nun that's kind of like chastising her, and then there's the wall that's being all bricked up. I honestly don't know what to make out of that. It just, to me, it seemed like, okay, she has a troubled relationship with the church. Maybe she went to Catholic school and, didn't have a good time. I didn't really know what to make out of that.
That obviously has something to do with it, but there's also just like this inherent trauma that always comes about in Catholic schools. And there is this sort of relationship between Catholicism especially and control over like women and women's bodies, because if you think Catholicism, there is also this association with constantly being made to have children.
Yeah.
No matter which side of this religious spectrum you're on, women, like Rosemary in the film, have very little agency or control over their own sexual well-being. Like, they're just told to, have kids, and that's it.
I feel like that's more of a societal statement rather than, like, a religious statement, though. Just because it transcends the religion.
I think it's both, but mostly societal, because I've seen pregnant women in my life be told, do this, do that, it's for the baby, and this and that, and like, it's almost like people care more about the thing inside of you rather than you, and you are thought of as a vessel, much like Rosemary was treated throughout this film.
Mm-hmm.
You're treated more as a vessel and a thing that happens to be like feeding this higher being that's inside you. And that's definitely how she's treated in this too, even though it's given the cover of, we care about you, and oh, are you okay? And it's really, is the baby okay?
Yeah.
I think that we do have to keep in mind that this was a 1960s film, so this is sort of the beginning of the women's liberation movement. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, plays a lot into the idea of agency. It's around the same time as Handmaid's Tale, which I thought of while watching this movie. Because then it's like, so who does the child belong to? Because in The Handmaid's Tale, it's not Offred, it's, Fred. And in this, there is this implication made throughout the movie that the child is neither Rosemary's, it belongs to Satan.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I did mention to Emily after we watched this, I was saying this film was like actually pretty progressive for the time, because yes, the women's liberation movement was starting to become a thing, but even the fact that they use the term postpartum depression, it's more of an awareness kind of thing rather than a liberation kind of thing. They're kind of put in this precarious position of having to toe that line in this place in history.
It's like Maury, It's the whole you're not the father thing. In some instances, people are really excited to not be the father, and then some people are like very upset that they're not the father. And in this one, it's a little bit of both. He's obviously not the father, but would he have wanted to be the father? And then there's like this whole idea, like, is he emotionally detached from her because of that? It's the same thing with Joseph wanting to initially leave Mary, but then being reconvinced by the angel, and in this case, he's basically being convinced by the two shoulder devils that live in the apartment above them.
Is it above or beside them? Because they can hear them through the wall.
Yeah, they're on the other side of the partition, so they're on the same floor. That's the whole thing in the beginning with the landlord, where they're like making fun of how, oh, these used to be 9s and now they're 6s or whatever.
Yeah, and also the covered closet. That's where they can enter through the apartment. Remember that part where she locked the door and she thought she was alone, but you could see them skipping through the hallway behind her? That's how they got in. Because it's connected.
And she goes through that later to like kind of crash their baby shower.
So here's the thing. Do you think that those apartments are rent controlled?
Now? Or then?
Well, second question is, do you think that any of them are still available?
Probably
you trying
not.
to do, Matt? You trying to make an Antichrist?
No, just get my feet wet with real estate.
Well, it's kind of like, remember in Candyman how she like pushes out the mirror? Mm-hmm. And it's just able to crawl into the next unit.
Yeah, inspired by that TikTok video.
Yeah, definitely. TikTok video that came out in, 1990?
Yeah.
This is set in New York, and we have Emily here who is from New York.
Is any of this realistic to New York life?
Is the traffic
probably not
everything
nowadays.
they make it?
Oh, the traffic is worse nowadays. In the 60s, it was like way less.
She was able to walk across a busy street and didn't just instantly get murdered, so...
Right.
You know what I found out is that was not staged. Like, they actually just kind of threw her in front of actual traffic.
Oh my god.
You couldn't do that nowadays. A cab would run her over.
They're like, no one will hit a pregnant lady.
Obviously, the rest of the movie is far from factual, because the devil's gay, so the whole premise sort of falls flat.
Is that like
yes.
a South Park reference?
Lil Nas X.
Oh.
Yeah, the devil's gay. But so is God, so it doesn't matter.
Well, God is dead, according to this movie.
But the very... Because, I mean, if you look at what... Platinum Star, no physical interaction with women, just like a... And then Satan, same deal. He wouldn't have done it. I just think that he's,
He's, into musical theater.
He's into musical theater, exactly. The Book of Mormon.
So I remember the part where Guy brings her all these roses? That's supposed to symbolize her womanhood and her fertility. He does that before he's like, let's have a baby. Also, it's a stark contrast between the devil's pepper and the little charm that she had, which is like gross smelling and obviously malicious, but the roses are supposed to make her feel comforted and they smell good,
So what is the purpose of the charm? Because I have a theory on that.
I think it's kind of like a pheromone thing to make the devil kind of attracted to her.
I thought that the Tannis root, because it's used ritualistically, and it's mentioned in the rituals in the book, and I think that they have that around her so that it masks the smell of other people with that charm, so that she doesn't know that, like, Dr. Saperstein is in on it from the beginning.
But that's also what gives Saperstein away later when she's waiting in the waiting room for her appointment, and the receptionist says that his aftershave smells like that, and she realizes, oh my god, he's in on it.
Right. It's the conversation with the nurse got started because the nurse recognized that she wasn't wearing the charm anymore. She's like, oh, thank God for getting that. I bet everything smells better now, because the doctor also smells like that aftershave. Why would Saperstein smell like that if it was pheromone related?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I can tell you it's because the devil's gay, but...
God damn it.
I worked my way back there.
Going back to the rose thing, I like that reading of like its contrast to the foul smell of the devil's pepper. And we've talked about before on this podcast how roses are kind of like the symbolic version of like a double-edged sword, because you have the beauty and the nice smells of the flower itself, but then it's got the thorns. That's almost the offering that Guy is making in that moment to Rosemary. He's saying, all right, let's have a baby. And that to her is like, oh, it's all flowers. But the thorns of it is, it's not going to be my baby, it's going to be the devil's baby, and it's going to be used as the Antichrist, and your life is going to be terrible now.
He's like, yeah, I'm going to get cucked by the devil.
Devil's Cuckold is what they should have called this movie.
Lil Nas X's next song.
Speaking of symbolism, what I noticed a lot of was the color. Matt loves his color theory here. So I noticed a lot of red, and that's to be expected in a movie that has some demonic elements to it. But then it kind of moved from red to white by the end of the movie. And we're getting a lot of red at the beginning. Rosemary's wearing a lot of red, and this is pretty much goes up until she starts realizing that something is amiss, and this isn't just her and Guy's baby. Then when she starts noticing things and becoming a little more paranoid, you see a lot of yellow all over the place. And that goes pretty much to the end, but at the end, there's more white than yellow, but it's kind of like the yellow's kind of mixed in there. The first time that you really see a lot of white is at Dr. Hill's office, where like everything is white and very sterile. I mean, that's kind of like our classic, mid-century depiction of doctors' offices. I still find it very interesting, and I don't know exactly what that's supposed to be getting at. I think the red is classic. We think of the devil as being red and that kind of thing, so that's kind of like the initial introduction of the devil. And then, Matt, you said that the yellow
wallpaper.
Yeah, and that, I think, checks out.
I think that it's a reference to the use of the yellow wallpaper as a maternal paranoia, because that's what the yellow wallpaper is obviously all about. And this came from a book. I would hasten to imagine that author was at least marginally familiar with the yellow wallpaper, since it is so significant when discussing like pregnancy, the women's liberation movement, and the nature of relationships. You mentioned the sterility thing of the doctor's office. I think that it's interesting that at the end, when they are preparing Rosemary to give birth, Rosemary is yelling, "It's supposed to be white, it's supposed to be sterile."
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, when they're pinning her down and putting the needle in her, and she screams that. She also says it's supposed to be clean, like sterile and clean.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of like another religious thing, because how do people get indoctrinated into Christianity while they're baptized with this holy water, which is supposedly like the cleanest substance out there?
Which is funny because it's not.
It's completely antithetical to the Christian convention. Her due date, and they sedate her and induce birth on June 28th. And one, it's almost exactly halfway through the year, which is, I don't know if that's supposed to be anything, but it's also the 6th month of 1966. That's 666. Also, just coincidentally, Elon Musk was born on June 28th. So just putting that out there.
The Antichrist.
Yep. Just across the board.
Fueling those conspiracy theories. Just bringing back the religion stuff. When Rosemary's like going to meet with Hutch, she finally hears that he has gone into a coma, and then the music kind of goes sour, which is like this really cool occult sounding music.
Yeah,
it's like this nice turn. That kind of like sound design keeps coming back, but then she runs into Minnie right after that, and Minnie is Christmas shopping. So again, we get this kind of like Christianity influence here, but we know that Minnie and Roman are anti-religious. They even are very open about that in their first dinner with Guy and Rosemary. So it's kind of this weird juxtaposition with like the really terrible news of your friend has gone into a coma, and then, hey, let's go Christmas shopping. And it's just immediate. It's in the same scene. It's this weird switch.
Yeah, this movie does a good job at sort of detailing those score moments and sort of leading you to them, which I definitely think is interesting and important for these types of movies. Crazy that Rosemary gives birth to Adrian, who would go on to fight Rocky Balboa.
That's a part that makes me angry, because they named her child without her consent.
I think then it's a good time to get into the whole consent, women's autonomy.
Bodily autonomy is the plot of the film. And it's interesting because if you didn't have that last scene, the whole movie could be read as this being Rosemary's paranoia.
I think it's good that we have a woman as a guest this week to give us like that perspective, because we talked about this when we were doing the African American films, and we can support the notion, but we can't exactly know how it feels. So if you want to speak on that.
Well, to begin with, this film is like extra disturbing to me as a woman just because of the nature of it. This poor woman, Mia Farrow does a really great job portraying Rosemary. She has this innocent air about her, this naivete, and she trusts Guy, but Guy puts her in this situation where she's raped by the devil, and then after that, he claims that he was the one who raped her in her sleep, as if that's somehow better. And he's all like, oh, I shaved down my nails. And she's like, I had this nightmare that I was being raped by some monster. And he's just like, hey, thank you. That's still pretty messed up. Even if you're husband and wife, you shouldn't do that. I know it was the 60s. They probably didn't think that far ahead.
Spousal consent was not a thing it wasn't a thing until like the 80s when it was actually made law.
Well, and what's interesting is that they did portray her as being like kind of sicked out by it, and she even like said that she was really uncomfortable with it. She does express her discomfort with it, which I think is like great, and I think that they did it to the extent that they could have gotten away with it at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of the horror.
Yeah, it is. It's part of the horror. That's why it's so effective for me personally, because that's something that women have to be aware of every day of their lives, being victimized by people that they trust and the world around them.
It's interesting. We finished the movie. I was like, well, it wasn't that scary. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, that's because I'm not a woman. And it's interesting that you mentioned Guy is this guy that she's supposed to trust. And she does trust him because she married him. It's just everyone in her life ends up betraying her in some way or another.
Or dying.
And Matt mentioned earlier that if it weren't for the last 14 minutes of the movie, you could explain it away as her paranoia. The only people besides Hutch that actually show her some compassion and understanding and support are her friends at her party that she throws. And then you never see them again.
Yeah.
They're also women, and that's why they're more understanding of the situation.
Witches also can't have the devil's child.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that many should become pregnant with.
Well, but she couldn't be because she's a witch. I'm just telling you, Zach.
Is that canon or did you just...
That's canon. That's all witches across the board. This movie, Sabrina the Teenage Witch with Melissa Joan Hart,
Wizard of Oz, Harry Potter,
yeah, it's all of them. Witches can't have the devil's child. The Omen, they couldn't do it in The Omen or in Paranormal Activia.
Oh, that's true. In Paranormal Activia, they don't.
It's not one of the witches.
Damn it! You had me saying it. God damn it. What was I saying? Oh, so they take away her bodily autonomy, but there's also this idea, and there was this idea that was so commonplace of the lunacy of women, and especially like the hysterics of pregnant women, because, their brains are addled by the hormones. And like, yes, hormone activity does affect your brain activity.
Hormone Activia, yeah.
Yeah.
The latest flavor.
What was I saying?
I've done fucked you up again.
For some reason. Oh, the hormones affecting the body. And that's the whole origin of the word lunatic, is because Luna being the moon and the menstrual cycle being based on about a month, which is like the cycle of the moon. So they're lunatics because they go crazy once a month. And it's like, well, that's terribly demeaning. You can't just be like, oh, it's the hormones, as if men don't have hormones.
It's also worth noting that the word hysteria originates from the Greek word for uterus. Hystera.
Yeah.
It goes way back before 1966, whenever this movie came out.
To when the book was written. 1286. The year of our Lord. Speaking of the year of our Lord, I love the reference at the New Year's party when Roman says, Happy New Year 1.
Yeah.
Because it's referencing before Christ was BC, but now it's year 1. It's the first year of the devil.
Yeah, that stuck out to me.
This movie has a lot of really great references. Not great references. It has references in it to older, like, 1940s movies. But actually, watching it again now, it's interesting how many references I suddenly realized were from this movie. With the big one being all of the first Annabelle movie. So it is a newlywed couple that is moving into a home that wants to get pregnant. So then it's going through this thing where they think that they are being haunted specifically because the Annabelle doll wants the baby. So it's the devil wanting the child. The apartment that they are in Annabelle, the layout is so similar. Go back and watch the Annabelle movie. So similar in both architecture and color design because it's all that yellow and red again.
Oh yeah. And also there's the whole scene with the window and she's like falling out the window and then she ends up dropping the doll out the window.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of like with Terry in the beginning of this movie.
Direct reference.
Wow, that is a good insight, Matt. You're absolutely right.
It's also in the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror 22.
Well, of course it is.
Yeah, 2011, but it was called Rosemary Lababanik.
That's like the Shining one is the Shinning.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like really obviously telling you which one they're ripping off, but like they just edge on copyright law. Speaking of humorous things, I think that there are some like pretty humorous moments in this movie. And I'll admit I had the IMDb page up when I was watching this, but when Rosemary and Terry are in the basement, Rosemary's kind of like side-eyeing her and like keeps like looking away and they're playing that game. And she goes, I just thought you looked like the actress Victoria Vitri. And she goes, oh yeah, I get that all the time. But it's hilarious because the actress who plays Terry is Victoria Vitri. I'm sure in the time it was like hilarious to anyone who was watching it because they would have known who Victoria Vitri was. But also with Roman, and he goes, name a place and I've been there. And Guy goes, Fairbanks, Alaska. And Roman just goes, I've been there. Yep, okay. This is the game we're playing?
Oh, yeah.
It was very comedic timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It makes those old people so likable.
I gotta mention the most satisfying part in this movie when at the end Rosemary is sitting and then Guy comes up to her and she spits in his face. The whole time I was yelling like, do something, take the knife, stab somebody, but she spits in his face and I feel like that was realistic and it said something because that was her husband, the one person in the world that she trusted. They were moving to a new place and all that because they mentioned before that they were from 2 different cities before they came to New York. So she spits in his face and it's like, that's it, I'm done with you because you did this to me.
Yeah, I really like that moment. And I kind of like that she didn't end up stabbing anyone because it's almost like spitting in his face did more than if she would have like gone around stabbing people because it's kind of like ties back into the whole like autonomy of women and like what would stabbing people do for her at this point.
Right. Yeah.
It's more important for her at this point to show that Guy has lost her respect than it is to go around trying to like kill all these people at once. And that wouldn't have really fit the whole vibe of the movie.
There's something too about the fact that she didn't go there to kill anyone. She went there to get her child back. She just wanted the baby, and even at the end, she sees that it's the son of Satan, but she still rocks the cradle, and she's still got that, like, little smile.
A mother's love.
Yeah, that it sort of transcends the fact that it wasn't theirs. And so as long as she has the child back, she's sort of happy, and in some ways, she just destroyed Guy. Like, Guy's done. The cult doesn't even need Guy anymore.
I think the sexual nature and, like, tension is very prevalent throughout this movie too. Like even when Rosemary's reading that All Them Witches book, then Guy takes it away from her and puts it up on their bookshelf. He puts it on top of 2 like encyclopedia looking books that are called Sexual Behavior of Males and Sexual Behavior of Females. And that's like a really subtle one. There's also The Naked Old People. They do like a lot of close-ups of Rosemary's breasts, which is like somewhat sexual and also maternal in a way. And I think that this movie is a very delicate balance between those 2 themes and religion at the same time, but religion kind of like transcends both those themes. There's just so much connection between all 3 of those.
And interestingly, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male is by Alfred Kinsey.
Oh, that is interesting.
He's the creator of the Kinsey scale, so he's the one that basically said that sexuality is a spectrum. It's not a straight or homosexual. It is gradations in between.
What did we think about the anagram?
Oh, dumb.
Yeah.
It's a reference to another movie. It's a reference to the movie Suspicion from 1941.
It was dumb. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little cheesy.
Oh, one thing I didn't say when we were talking about the roses. Rose is literally in her name, as well as Mary, the Virgin Mary. So she's kind of like the opposite.
Before we even watched it, I was like, I knew the premise because, I've been a member of society my whole life. So I was like, if there's a rose in this movie, there's got to be, it's got to be something. And then I forgot, of course, when we were watching it. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's good.
It's a little like on the nose, but in a good way.
For 1968, it's fine. They hadn't even put a man on the moon yet, Zach. Let them have this.
Yeah, I liked it. I think it's very meaningful and like lives up to its legacy. I don't think that its impact is really like faded with time.
No.
Yeah, if you guys don't have anything else, I do have a game prepared.
All right.
So, I didn't think
Prepare
about
it.
this being with 3. You know what? I didn't actually prepare a game. No, this is called Witch Witch. And I'm going to say the name of a witch, and you are to tell me if they are a fictional witch or if they're just a wrongfully prosecuted woman in our terrible reality.
Okay.
So there are 6 of these, so I'll give you each 3, all right?
Okay.
Since Emily is our wonderful guest, she'll get the easiest. Number 1. Minerva McGonagall.
Harry Potter, she's fake.
She is fictional. All right, very good. 1 for Emily. All right, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Mother Shipton.
It's gotta be fake, right?
She was real because she was an English prophetess from the 16th century, back when they called people things like Mother Shipton. What's crazy is that she had a very unfortunate appearance, and that spurred rumors that her father was the devil. So, literally people just thought she was a witch because she's kind of ugly.
Yeah. That's
So, 16th century England.
That's upsetting.
That's, like I said, our terrible reality that we live in. All right, back to Emily. We got Agnes Sampson.
I'm gonna say real. That sounds like a real name.
You're right. She was real. She was a midwife and healer from Scotland, and she was tortured until she confessed to practicing dark magic. All right, back to Matt. We got Fiona Good.
Fiona Good is not real.
Mm-hmm. Do you know where she's from?
That's American Horror Story.
Yep. Yeah, she's from the Coven season of American Horror Story, which is, in my opinion, the best season.
You know what? I disagree, but that's okay. I liked the 2nd season and then the 3rd season.
Was the 2nd season Asylum?
Yes.
I did not like that season.
Oh, I loved Asylum. I thought Asylum was by far the scariest.
I just couldn't get into it.
Coven was just fun.
But that season was the best because it had Stevie Nicks on it.
Stevie Nicks was very good in that one.
Yeah, it was an amazing performance in the middle of an episode. We're getting this is the hardest one, all right? You ready, Emily?
Yeah.
All right, we got Malin Matsdotter.
Huh.
Not my daughter.
Is that real?
She was real. She's got a weird last name because she is Finnish. She was in Sweden. She was a widow, and she was accused by her own daughters of being a witch. And they said that she abducted their children and took them to a satanic Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And
wow.
Malin was considered the only witch in Swedish history to have been burned alive. Normally what the protocol was that they decapitated or hanged the witches, and then the bodies were burned at the stake. But because she refused to confess, she received a more brutal end. Yeah, and notice all these real ones are just really terrible treatment of women. So, not to defend the witches in Rosemary's Baby, but, this kind of goes along with the theme of Rosemary's Baby. All right, I got one more for you, Matt.
Sure.
The Blair Witch.
Zach, God damn it.
Now, you got to really think about this one.
No, I don't. No, Zach. I hate you so much.
I've trapped him.
I don't think it's real. I told you that I don't think that it is real. It is entirely manufactured and that something unrelated happened to those 3 kids.
Well, the real answer is we may never know, but we're going to give it to you. We know that those actors went on to have careers in other films and TV shows, so pretty sure the Blair Witch is not real, and Matt hates me now. So, this has been Witch Witch.
Nice. I have one for you. Are you ready? Sabrina.
No. Sabrina who?
Sabrina the...
Isn't her last name Spell something? Spellman?
It's Spellman.
Yeah, that kind of gives it away, doesn't it?
Yeah, but, Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Emily, if you would like to give an Instagram or Twitter or something.
Yes, I would. My Instagram is mgez24, spelled EMGUEZ24.
Nice. I follow Emily. And again, she did the cover art for our podcast. It is very good. She does other horror art and just art in general. So we love her art. It's all over my home. So it's pretty good stuff. And thanks for being on here with us today. It was great to have you, especially for this film.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach.
And this is Emily.
And remember, don't make a witch mad or she's liable to fly off the broom handle.
Just defeats the purpose of our whole conversation.